Hello everyone, welcome to today's current affairs session of Civilspedia. The topics we are going to see is hyperspectral imaging, PAiSA and National Urban Livelihood Mission. Then with respect to editorial topics, it is Indigenous People and the last topic is Global Compact for Migration. The first one, the hyperspectral imaging satellite. This recently our ISRO has launched this hyperspectral imaging satellite on this launching vehicle of PSLV C-43. Along with that, this hyperspectral satellite, it has launched 30 more satellites. That is 1 micro and 29 nano satellites has been launched along with this hyperspectral imaging satellites. So from Sriharikota they have launched. The speciality of this is this PSLV C-43, it is a 4-stage satellite that consists of 2, that is solid stage and liquid stage alternatively. And this is the lightest version of PSLV version. The reason for this lightest version is it has no added thrust booster. That is, the thrust booster is to give extra force to go into the orbit. That was not present in this PSLV C-43. And the total weight of this satellite is 641.1 kg, 641.5 kg only. And the most important interesting thing of this satellite is this hyperspectral imaging, because not all the countries are having this hyperspectral imaging technologies. This hyperspectral imaging technologies has the power to combine the combination of this digital imaging as well as along with this spectroscopy. So what is this hyperspectral imaging satellite is? It is an advanced Earth observation satellite that has been placed around 633 km above the ground into this polar sun synchronous orbit. The service of this satellite will give till 2023. That is, for the 5 years period, this satellite will give images of our country. And the most important thing is this satellite can see up to 55 spectral bands, and using this 2 payload, that is the payload consisting of visible near infrared and shortwave infrared. So what is the range of this infrared is starting from gamma rays, X-rays, UV rays, then visible, then infrared, micro and then radio waves. In that, this visible and infrared waves are very important to study the Earth's geology. So with that, this satellite will study about these 2 ranges. That is this visible near infrared and shortwave infrared. That is, this visible infrared will have, visible range of wavelength will have this 0.4 to 0.7 micrometer. While this infrared of this near infrared will have 0.7 to 1.4 micrometer. And with respect to this shortwave infrared will have this 1.4 to 3 micrometer of wavelength. And this is not the first time India is launching this hyperspectral satellite. We have already used this hyperspectral imaging sensor already in this IMS, that is in ISRO's mini satellite 1 in 2008, as well as in the Chandrayaan 1 we have used this hyperspectral imaging sensors. But the specialty of this satellite is first time we have exclusively made a satellite for this hyperspectral imaging. So what is the main applications of this hyperspectral imaging? Why we are giving more importance to this is it has much wider application with respect to this civilian, because it will use to study more about this mineral exploration, geology, because each and every mineral exhibit their own spectral signature. So by having more and more in-depth and narrow wavelength, then only we can understand what is the minerals that is present. Then only we can differentiate what are the different kinds of minerals that is available with respect to this India. And apart from that, we can utilize this hyperspectral imaging to study the growth of the plants, so we can have more advanced technology with respect to this agriculture and forestry. Apart from that, we can use for this oceanography, because to study the nature of this ocean and to study this soil geology, we need to have this hyperspectral imaging. And with respect to this militaries, we can utilize it for the surveillance. So for the enhancing the security, we need to have this hyperspectral imaging, because this will give much clarity than the multispectral imaging sectors. And what is the difference between this broadband, multispectral, hyperspectral and ultraspectral? The major division between this is, first one is this wavelength. So it has the very narrow bandwidth. So for example, if multispectral imaging satellite means it will have at least the 0.1 micrometer of wavelength. While if you have this hyperspectral imaging, then within this 0.1 wavelength itself, that is 0.4 to 0.5 micrometer itself, we will have more and more of bands. So we can distinguish it between 0.41 micrometer to 0.42 micrometer. So we have more number of bands with respect to hyperspectral. If we go for ultraspectral, then there will be thousands of bands, that is within this 0.4 to 0.5 micrometer itself, we will have more than 10 bands. So with respect to this ultraspectral imaging, that shows we can have minute details, that is even small differences in the spectral signature itself we can identify. With that thing, we can study more about the vegetation and more about how this oceanography related things are happening. So it will help to have more geological as well as geographical perspective of analysis. And the next topic is this PAiSA, the portal for affordable credit and interest subvention access. This portal has been launched by our Ministry of Urban Housing and Urban Affairs, and this is the initiative under this DD-NULM Antyodaya Yojana of National Urban Livelihood Mission. The main objective of this portal is to have more interest subvention to be provided to the small entrepreneurs. So if this portal is this website is a centralized platform, so that the process this beneficiaries of loan for this MSME sectors people. So it will help financial support to this micro and small entrepreneurs. And this web platform has been designed and developed by this Allahabad Bank. And the major objective of this is to have enhance or ensure the transparency and efficiency in the service delivery, especially to the entrepreneurs. And second important thing is this direct benefit transfer of subvention on the monthly basis under this portal will give more financial subsidies, there's more financial support to the small scale entrepreneurs. And this portal is the main thing to have provide for more and more entrepreneurship development. So by having this more interest subventions, the people of a small entrepreneurs will have more financial support, thereby they can enhance their potential. So the next topic is Deen-Dayal Antyodaya Yojana National Urban Livelihood Mission. Recently the news is with respect to this mission is, this mission has the objective of covering this shelter or providing the shelter to the homeless urban people, as well as providing the livelihood, alternative livelihood for this urban people. So urban vulnerable people. So recently this NLUM has covered all the 4041 statutory cities and towns. And along with the shelter, this scheme has planned to equip this shelter along with essential services, so that it will address the needs of this urban homeless people. And apart from that, it also aimed to address this livelihood of urban street vendors by providing suitable space for them, credit and social security, as well as providing skills to this urban street vendors. For example, recently our Delhi government has taken a step to have certificate program for this for urban street food people. So who are the selling the food in this urban street, they will get a skill training under this scheme. So, and another core belief of this NLUM is to enhance the poor people's capabilities, because the poor people, the minds of the poor people is not poor mind. It has the thoughts and imaginations. By giving a proper platform to the poor people, through this scheme, our government is planning to alleviate the poor people from the poverty thing. So the main core belief is poor people have the talent. The problem is they don't have the proper platform to enhance that, because they are at the vulnerable stage. So by having a proper space and providing proper credit facilities, as well as giving the proper social security and skills, through this scheme, the government is planning to remove the poor people from this poverty. And this still now we have 1.7 million people are homeless in India. And our government has targeted to have every Indian to have a home within this 2022. So to achieve this target, we need to have work a lot under this scheme. But this scheme is not properly implemented at the true letter and spirit. So recently Supreme Court has warned many state governments that the fund has been allocated to this scheme, but the proper implementation of the scheme is not happening. So to check the vigilance, the Supreme Court has said that each state government has to submit the report on how the scheme has been implemented properly in their state. And apart from that, there was 20% increase in this houseless people in the cities, because more and more migration is happening place. So rural to urban migration is taking at a tremendous level. So this leads to more people started to live in the slum area. That makes this homeless people proportion in the urban cities is happening to be increased in 20%. While with respect to this rural area, it shows 28% decline in this homeless people. So with respect to rural area, the urban rural livelihood mission is performing well. But with respect to this urban livelihood mission, we need to have work out a lot to make this scheme to be a successful one. The next topic is Global Compact for Migration. The recent news with respect to this Global Compact for Migration is recently Slovakia, the European country, has been said to withdraw from this Compact of Migration. So what is this Compact for Migration is? It is a non-legally binding document that has a 23 objectives that is focusing exclusively on this migration. And this is the first international agreement to have exclusively concentrate on the migration, migrant people, and how the livelihood of the people and social security of the people is affecting this migrant people. And this UN as well as this International Organization for Migration will oversee the implementation of this Global Compact for Migration. And the history of this Global Compact for Migration starts from 2016, when this UN General Assembly adopted this New York Declaration for Refugees and Migrants for this safe, orderly and regular migrations. So in 2018, the text of this Global Compact for Migration has been finalized, and in December 10 to 11 in Marrakesh, in Morocco, there will be intergovernmental conferences will be conducted to study how to implement this Global Compact for Migration. And the major objective of this GCM, Global Compact for Migration, is first one is to address this. That is, it has 23 objectives, and the most important objective is to address the structural inequalities that has been prevailing in this origin of a migrant people. Because the people are migrating from their origin country to another country, the major reason is because of two things, that is push factor and pull factor. If it is by the pull factor of this from a well-developed countries by this migrant people, then it is no problem. But if it is a push factor because of this adversities of war or any other declarations of any other ethnic problems or any other of social and insecurity things, and this breakdown of disease makes the people to migration from their origin country to other countries. So if we properly address the structural inadequacies in this origin country, then more people started to retain in their own country instead of going as a migrant to other countries. So first objective is to address the proper structural inequalities or structural deformities that has been taking place in the origin of the migrant countries. And second important thing is to reduce the vulnerabilities of these migrants, because these migrants are the most vulnerable category of the people, because they don't have proper social documents to avail any benefits. So a person is migrant from one state to another state, he will not have proper document and he don't have proper social security around him. And most of the migrants get exploited by their worker, then the employees also. Then the third important thing is to enable the migrant for sustainable development, because this migrant is not a negative connotation. We can utilize this migrant population as a positive thing, because they are also asset of a country. So if we properly utilize this human capabilities of this migrant people, we can make them to be achieve for the sustainable development, thereby helping their own community as well as the community of the area where they are residing. So by enabling the migrants to have achieved the sustainable development goal is the one of the major thresholding objective of this Global Compact for Migration. And with respect to this Global Compact for Migration, what is the India stance is? India says it's okay, but the India in UN, they said that we need to differentiate between legal and illegal migrants, because this UN document started to converge this legal and illegal migrants, and it gives more leverage to this illegal migrations also. So the India in UN said that we need to differentiate between this legal and illegal migration, because we need to have more people go through as a legal migration instead of illegal migrations. So by liberalizing small conditions of this legality, it makes more people go through as a legal migrant instead of this illegal migrations. Because India said if we started to liberalize more and more of this illegal migration rules, then it will give incentives to this human trafficking networks who are exploiting this migrant people a lot. So we need to curtail this human trafficking networks. For that, we need to have clear-cut distinction between legal and illegal migration. And apart from that, many countries like US and Hungary and more Austria and many other European countries have started to withdraw from this Global Compact for Migration. They said that they cannot take this migration as a human right, because this document is saying that migration is a human right. If it comes under migration as a human right, it will have more protection rights to this migrant people. But these countries like Slovakia, Hungary, Austria, Italy, and US doesn't want to have this human right as a migration for these people. And what are the other issues with respect to this migrant people is xenophobia, that is fear for strangers, as well as this they have very low access to the social service, and then they have more and more subjected to this sexual harassment. Apart from that, what are other things with respect to this migration people is UNESCO's International Convention on Protection of Migrant Workers as well as their family members. It is one of the important agreement with respect to this migration. So then we will move to the next topic of indigenous people. The recent issue is the death of this American missionary by the North Sentinel tribe is most burning topic of this indigenous people. Whether really we are protecting the indigenous people or we are exploiting the indigenous people, it's the big question mark between this our government. So what are the things with respect to this tribal people, what the challenges they are facing and what we can do as a measures to protect them and properly nurturing them. So first thing is with respect to this indigenous people, the recent news is recently Ministry of Home Affairs has submitted the report to National Commission of Scheduled Tribes about this restricted area permit and forest right and this act. So what are the things the foreigners are doing under this act? So recently they said that under this report, Ministry of Home Affairs said that there was more than 44 allegations, that is violation has been done by foreigners with respect to this Andaman Nicobar Islands. So what is the thing is recently the central government has relaxed this protection of Andaman Nicobar in the restricted area permit. The foreigners cannot enter into the restricted area permit. But under this, recently our central government has relaxed 29 islands of including this North Sentinel Island to have this restriction area permit. But but under this thing, state government will have this Forest Right Act as well as this Andaman Nicobar regulation rules. So the foreigner, that is the American, has entered into this. They said that this restricted area permit rules has been relaxed, but he has to take a permission from state government under these two acts. But he was entered as an illegal thing. Then the next thing is with respect to this India is a home to 700 tribal peoples. So comprising of 104 million peoples. So that takes around 8.6% of a total population belong this scheduled tribes as per this 2011 census. So totally 573 communities has been recognized as a scheduled tribe, and the size ranging from the largest size of Gond 7.4 million to a smaller size of Chimals of Andaman that has only 18 people. And India is the second largest tribal population after Africa. And the recent thing with respect to this tribal people is India has signed in this UN Declaration of Rights of Indigenous People 2007 as well as this ILO C-169. It will talks about indigenous and tribal people of 1989, but India is not part of this ILO, that is International Labour Organization Convention of 169. And what are the challenges that the tribal people are facing? First one is this legal loopholes, because we have more and more rights giving through this legality through this tribal people, but this is not happening in the reality. There was many loopholes in this legal things. So the people are trying very hard to get their rights through this legal laws. So best example is this Monkey Dia, particularly vulnerable tribal group, because they belongs to the Simli-Fall Tiger Reserves and they couldn't get this habitat right from this under this legal law. So the problem of this getting habitat rights is because the definition of habitat is very narrowed. So many tribal people cannot get their habitat rights. The first tribe to get the habitat rights in India is Baika tribe of Madhya Pradesh. And second important thing is this poor enforcement of existing standards, because we have PAiSA Act and Interstate Migrant Workmen Act of 1979 as well as Article 244 that will give administration rights, and scheduled Article 5, and then Article 19 will give exclusive right for not to reside in this tribal scheduled area, and so many protection we are giving under this law, but the enforcement of this thing is very poor. That's why there was a recent issue with respect to this poor enforcement of existing standards, that is this Patalgadi movement. This Patalgadi movement was started in Jharkhand recently. They are saying in this the Patal means a stone. They have erecting a stone in their place in many villages of Jharkhand, that the rules and regulations of this PAiSA and all other act will be encrypted in these stones. So the people will get aware of what are the rights they are availing. So they said that it is the self-determination. So under this UN Declaration of Rights of Individual People, we have said the Article 3 of this UN Declaration has said that self-determination and self-autonomy is the underlying principle for this protecting this tribal people. So under this article, India has included many provisions for this tribal people self-determination. But it is not happening to this tribal people. So in this Patalgadi movement, the tribal people of Jharkhand says that self-determination and self-authority is the most important thing, and they will not leave any other outsiders to rule them. And third important challenges that the tribal people are facing is this loss of forest cover. More and more people started to encroach for this agriculture purpose into this forest area. This leads to loss of forest cover, as well as this monoculture plantation is one of the important threatening thing of this food security of the tribal people, because we started to evacuate the diversified plantation into monoculture of teak, sal, like that. So with that things, the monoculture plantation will make them reduce their food security as well as make them too vulnerable to more and more diseases. And this expansion of hybrid crops will also have more impact on this tribal people's health. And the fourth important challenges with respect to this tribal people is the battle over this coal, oil and forest produce rights, because they wanted to have this ownership rights over the resources of this oil, coal and forest produce. And fourth important issue is the health, because the education and health is the most important thing that we have to provide for this tribal people, because this malnutrition or maternal mortality rate or infant mortality rate is so high for this tribal people. We need to reduce them. We need to provide proper medical facilities for these people. And another important thing was why the health is more deteriorating is the more and more conflict between them, and they started to have more people started to be evacuated from their area and living as the refugees. That makes them more vulnerable to get this medical healthcare facilities. For example, the recent conflict of Bru tribes versus this Mizo tribe. In 1997, there was a very much ethnic conflict between this Bru tribe as well as this Mizo tribe. That makes more Bru tribes started to exodus from their own Mizoram area into a Tripura area. And for the past 20 years, they are living as refugees in this Tripura area. So being a refugees, the medical camp is not properly providing the medical care. That started to deteriorate the health conditions of the tribal people. So more and more tribal people have started to, because of a land acquisition or because of the ethnic conflict, they have started to living as the refugees. That makes them more vulnerable to get access to this proper quality education or any other essential services. And another important thing is this inadequate address of tribal rights with respect to this BITs, that is the bilateral investment treaties. In bilateral investment treaties, we are not concentrating much of this tribal people's rights, because India have more than 80 plus of a bilateral investment treaty, and recently we have modified into this model of bilateral investment treaty. But in that thing also, India doesn't include the rights of the tribal people, because most of the mining companies or foreign companies that are started to utilize this bilateral investment treaty to exploit the minerals from this tribal areas, but they are not addressing the proper needs of the tribal people. And another important thing is, if a government started to if this government started to get cancelling the contract given to this people, this foreign MNCs under this bilateral investment treaty, then the companies will pull the government to fall under this investment treaty arbitration. So India is losing the case under this. So recent this Niyamagiri Odisha case of bauxite mining, India has lost their case in this investment treaty arbitration. So if a properly tribal rights is not incorporated in the bid, then it will give a protection for the investor companies. So we need to have this ITA. In order to reduce the threat of this ITA, we need to have incorporate this tribal rights into this bilateral investment treaties. Apart from that, the exclusion of indigenous people in the policy making is the most important challenge that we are facing. Because from the tribal Panchashil itself, our former Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru has said that the knowledge of the tribal people is more important to govern their areas. We need to accept the knowledge of the tribal people. So by having incorporating the curriculum of the tribal people along with this mainstream society, we need to have more tribal people included into this policy decision making. And what are the measures that the government has taken is, in 1973, it started from 1973, we have this Debor committee that has classified this primitive tribal groups. So then in 2006, we have this Forest Right Act. That Right Act only defined this definition of habitat. So that gives the habitat rights, but the definition was very narrow down. So we need to have wider the definition of this habitat, so that more tribal people started to get their habitat rights. And in 2008, under this, we have launched a scheme of a development scheme that categorized 75 people as a particularly vulnerable tribal group. And in 2014, this Zaza committee, it is very important with respect to the tribal peoples. they have made so many of good recommendations. And the most important recommendation is this curriculum recommendations. They had said both the health and the education parameters has to be include the local curriculum. So instead of enforcing the curriculum of a mainstream into the tribal people, we need to have the curriculum that is based on their own local needs. And the schemes that has been taken by the government is the Van Bandhu Kalyan Yojana and Kanin Kshetra Kalyan Yojana. This Van Bandhu Kalyan Yojana will focus on the scheduled areas, and this Kanin Kshetra Kalyan Yojana will focus on this mining related issues of the people, because the government is getting money by mining the natural resources from that area. By having proper rights or proper funding for this tribal people, the mining affected tribal people, this scheme will be helpful. And with respect to this tribal people is the TriFed, is the tribal federation to market the produce of the tribal people, because the tribal people have more knowledge in their indigenous things. So by having the craft work, they are very skilled one. But by having more and more marketing is the problem. So by through this TriFed, our government is trying to have this market collaboration so that the products of this tribal people will get reach the mainstream of the people. And apart from that, we need to explore more of the sports personalities from this tribal people, because they have more good physical things and they have more involved in the sporting activities. So by addressing or by hunting the proper sports people, we need to have focused more on this tribal people. And apart from that, the issue of the patent rights, making the tribal people not accessing the market properly. So we need to have more arrangement for this patent rights for their traditional knowledge, and we need to have proper market system for their handicrafts. With that thing, we will end today's current affairs session. Thank you.